get started so we can get home by 2 or 3 in the morning. Oh, wait.
Stop.
It's not that long tonight. All right, here we go. How's everybody doing today? Oh, that was.
Wait, today was a good day.
How is everybody doing today? Oh, my word. All right. All right, well, here we go. Let's get started. Anybody in here know what a euphemism is?
A what?
A euphemism.
Instrument.
No, it's not a euphemism.
When you're young. You should know.
No, that'd be more like a euphemism. It's just a saying. It's a saying that you use in place of something else instead of saying the cold hard fact, dead true, won't use the euphemism. Have you ever heard the euphemism hit rock bottom?
Yeah. That's not what's it called? What's it called in English?
It's not a simile. So she's like
Metaphor.
a metaphor. No,
Get that English
not a metaphor.
What's it called?
It's
Hyperbole.
Boy, it went what?
Hyperbole. A hyperbole is an exaggeration.
It's an example.
What about
You know how most people say it?
What?
Hyperbole.
That's how I say it, hyperbole.
Figurative
It's always
language.
been taught.
No, that's the whole thing.
It is a type of figurative.
Jay, what do you call it?
I think it's called a euphemism.
But yeah, the thing I'm mentioning is the hit rock bottom thing is a euphemism. So, you know, we really didn't take very long to get off course on this. That's a good job.
We're very focused.
Hey, squirrel. That's good. All right. A euphemism is what we're talking about tonight. So you have, anybody not heard hit rock bottom? If you haven't heard of it, that's fine. Just say you hadn't heard of it. Raise your hand, do something like that. Does everybody know what it means? Or can anybody define it for me? Go ahead.
You're down bad. That is
That's a pretty good one. Let's see, what did I write it? As in a person that is in such despair and despondency that they have reached the lowest place they can in regard to their emotional, physical, and or spiritual station in life. That sound about the same as what you said? I think so. Yeah, I think that's right. So, in other words, when you hit rock bottom, the reason that euphemism is used for somebody that's in such a bad place, mentally, physically, or spiritually, is because rock bottom is as low as it gets. You can't get any lower, right? That's as bad. You've hit the bottom. It's as bad as it gets. And not only is it the bottom, it's rock bottom, meaning that there literally is no way to get any further down. At least if it was a muddy bottom, you could still sink the waves. But on a rock bottom, you can't. That's why they use that. Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you a little bit about somebody who found themselves literally at rock bottom, and we're going to talk about the results of having been to rock bottom. So, in our Bibles tonight, let's look at Genesis chapter 37. We go to Genesis chapter 37, and we're going to read verses 23 through 28 first. Genesis 27. Or no, 37, I'm sorry. Genesis 37, 23 through 38. Or through 23 through 28. I'll get it right there. And it says this, and it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. Anybody familiar with that coat of many colors, who this Joseph is? Y'all know that story?
Yeah, you had a lot of brothers that got jealous.
Nope. That's the same one. Let's keep reading. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and they lifted up Joseph out of the pit. And they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now, Joseph literally was at rock bottom. He was thrown into a pit. place that was dry, arid place, and it was rocky. So he is literally at the bottom of a hole that is a rocky bottom. So he's literally at rock bottom, but not just literally. Tell me, why did Joseph have that coat, that covering coat?
His son father gave it
Why did his dad give it to him? He was a slave. He was the favorite. He had the lofty position of being the favorite son. Well, he had that. This is where he was. This kid didn't have to go out and work with his brothers. Yeah. Yes, they were. But I mean, here he didn't even have to go out. They're out working, and he don't even have to go out and work. Instead, his dad's got him to go do an errand, run out and tell him something, do something with him, that kind of thing. And they don't like him. They're not, you know. So here he is. He's had it made. He's like, I don't know. Is it like Will or Side? Which one would it be like? Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. But anyway, it's gonna. He's literally got it made. He don't have to do nothing. His brother's out working, and his brothers are like, you know. So this kid, he's at the top, and his brothers conspire against him, and they get a hold to him, and they take his favorite little coat off that his daddy gave him, and they throw him down in the hole, and he's at rock bottom. And then, not only do they do that to him, but they sell him as a slave. He goes from being able to do what he wants, when he wants, got all the money, nothing to stop him from being able to do whatever he wants to do. Got it made, as Will would say, like Simon. And now, all of a sudden, he finds himself a slave. No freedom, no ability to go do anything. Got nothing. That's literally going from the top to the very bottom. It was not, I mean, can you think of something that would be worse? Honest to goodness, if I was Joseph, I would have probably been like, y'all just killed me. I'd rather y'all kill me than send me off down there to Egypt. So, I mean, he's probably lower than he would have been had they just went ahead and killed him. Or at least in his mind. That's where he's at right now. But guess what? He didn't stay at rock bottom. Let's look a couple pages up. Go to Genesis chapter 39. In Genesis chapter 39, we're going to read verses 1 through 6. Genesis 39, verses 1 through 6. And it says this, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. In other words, Potiphar buys him as his slave from these guys that had brought him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house. And all that he had, he put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not all he had, save the bread which he did eat. Or in other words, he didn't even know what all he had. He let Joseph take care of that. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. All right, so now we find out that Joseph, who had hit rock bottom, and he was at rock bottom, gets sold as a slave, but then he gets blessed where he goes. And the house he's in, he literally rises to the top of that house, and he's in charge of everything in that house and everybody in that house. He's over all the other servants. He's over all the money that comes and goes, over all the food that comes and goes. He's in charge of a rich man, a rich and powerful man's house and estate. So he's now rose back up to the top. With the exception of having the freedom to go and come as he pleases back home, Joseph now was once again able to have whatever he wanted, to do whatever he wanted for the most part. So he's come back up out of rock bottom. He's doing pretty good again. It's pretty awesome, man. Does that sound like life? You hit it low and then you come back. Well, let's see what is next for Joseph. Go down to verse 20, right there in chapter 20, or chapter 39. Look at verse 20. I'm not going to read everything in between, but listen to this. In verse 20 of chapter 39, it says that Joseph's master, Potiphar, took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. Now, give you the little backstory instead of reading all of it. Potiphar's wife decided she liked Joseph a lot, but Joseph said, you're my master's wife. I'll have nothing to do with you. And he was an honorable man. He'd done what he was supposed to do. And what she had done to him was just wrong. And because of jealousy and because of sinful behavior that he would not participate in, well, he ended up getting, he gets rewarded by getting thrown in prison. Guess what? He's at rock bottom again. Now he's in a hard, stony prison cell. Back to rock bottom once again. And folks, prisons back then and in other places, nothing like prison we got here in the United States. Prison is not a nice place to be. Prison's still not a nice place to be, but it's even worse in most places than in other times. So here's Joseph once again back at rock bottom. So what's happened? He started up here, right? And then he found himself down here. And then he got back up here. Not quite as high as here, but he got back up here. And now he's back down here. Just as low as he had been, probably. He made it more. Because now he's in prison. And he's in Egypt. All right, so rock bottom again. But we're going to keep on. The next heading says this, back up, kind of, and down again, kind of. So let's look at the next verse, verse 21 through 23. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. And whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him. And that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So once again, we find that Joseph is blessed. And he gets to be in charge again and over everything. Now, that's good, but I mean, he is still a prisoner. It is still prison. So, yeah, it's really good and he's back up some, but he is still in prison. So now it's kind of, he started here, went down here, got back up pretty high, went back down really low, and now it's kind of somewhere in the middle. Life could be worse, but it could be a lot better. Yep, he's found favor, and he's back in charge of a lot of things, but he is still a prisoner, and he is still in prison. So, he's kind of in between now. And that's in between. Not really all the way up, not really down, either, just kind of there. Sometimes people call that being in a rut. Can't get up, can't get down, you just in a rut. There's no use. Well, while he's in prison, and I'm not going to read all of that, I'll just kind of sum it up for you. While he's in prison, Pharaoh, the king, the big guy, his baker and his baker and the Lord, I can't think of it. Well, it's the butler or cupbearer. Butler and baker, that was the two that had made the Pharaoh mad for some reason, and they get thrown in prison. Each of them has a dream. And Joseph interprets their dreams for them. God gave him a wisdom and understanding of what it meant. And he interprets it to these two. And they basically said, what it says is that one of them is going to get to go back and be in good graces of Pharaoh and go back to work. The other one is going to be hung and killed by Pharaoh. And it happens just like that. Now, all Joseph asked was, please remember me when you get back to Pharaoh's house, so I can get out of prison. Because remember, he's not rut. Even though he's kind of in charge of everything in the prison, he's still in prison. He's still in prison. And so he just asked, please remember me. Well, do you think he got remembered when, I think it's the baker that ended up going back. I'll have to read it to make sure. But anyway, do you think the baker remembered him when he got back? When the baker got restored from his rock bottom and he got to go back up to his lofty place there at Pharaoh, do you think he remembered Joseph? Do you think he told Pharaoh, hey, there's this guy in prison that you you really ought to do something good for him because he was really good to me. You think that happened? Anybody know? No? No? No, it didn't. It didn't happen. Well, it didn't happen yet. So, let's look now. Hold on. I don't want to read that part yet. I'll give y'all one some of those little fruits instead of reading all that. Anyways, 2 years pass. Pharaoh has a dream. Nobody, none of the magicians or wise men of Egypt can tell him what these two dreams mean, or two dreams. None of them can tell. And the baker's like, you know what? That Joseph guy, he was able to tell me what my dream meant. So he tells Pharaoh. Pharaoh sends for him. This is 2 years later now. So Joseph has spent the last 2 years in prison, and now all of a sudden he gets called to Pharaoh's court. It talks about the fact that he cleans himself up, he gets himself presentable, he goes and sees Pharaoh, and he gets there, and he tells Pharaoh, what? In your citation? Yeah.
It said that the baker got killed.
Okay, maybe it's the baker that got killed and it's the butler that got to live. I'd have to read through there. It's one of the other. And it's according to what version you're looking at there and what words are used. But the one that lived, he remembered finally, and he said, he tells him, this guy can do it. All right, Pharaoh brings Joseph to him. Joseph tells him what the dreams mean. And they're very significant. It's a big deal. And it's about storing up, because you got a famine coming, and it's the only way you're going to make it through the famine is by storing up. And so Joseph tells him all about this. Now let's go to Genesis 41, and I'm going to read to you verses 39 through 43. Genesis 41, 39 through 43 says this. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according to thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, bow the knee, and he made him ruler over all of the land of Egypt. All right. What did that just say? What did it say? What happened right there? Is that what I read? Huh?
You take the ruler.
It's not at rock bottom.
Yeah, he's definitely not at rock bottom now. He just went from being a prisoner to being, with the exception of Pharaoh, being the most powerful man in the strongest, most civilized nation in the world at that time. Number two. The number two guy in the world's greatest power at the time. And he was just a prisoner, and he had just been a slave right before that. So he's not at rock bottom anymore at all. So from slave in the land of Egypt, second only to the Pharaoh. And where did that all start at? Where did all of this start at? Yeah, and he found himself rock bottom in a hole, in the desert. I mean, that's basically, that's where he started at. So, second in command of Egypt is a long, long way to the rocky hole. Here's the question. Why did all of this happen to Joseph? I need to hear some answers. Why do you think this happened to Joseph?
He was bad.
Oh, with that. All right. Yeah.
He was being tested, like they say,
That's a good way to look at it.
Because we're in a fallen world where bad stuff happens to good people.
Okay. Okay. Anybody, any other observations?
Maybe it had nothing to do with Joseph and a lot to do with us, like, because what's the scripture later on that's where Joseph tells them what you meant for evil, God meant for,
That's exactly
Good
where
or
we're going.
whatever.
Yes, yes. All right. Because that's actually the next, right after the question, Genesis 50:20, and that's what 50:20 is. Let's turn to there. The last chapter of Genesis, real quick. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20 said just exactly what you were saying. But as for you, this is Joseph talking to his brothers, but as for you, ye thought evil against me. But God meant it unto good, to bring it to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. What does that mean?
But when we try to do that, God was only aiming for something good.
What is good? Does that make you think of a verse in the Bible? There's a verse.
That one is Romans.
That's in Romans.
For manifest. So what was the one to manifest? For those that love him, what is it?
Romans 8:28. Y'all know that one? Romans 8:28. I'll read it to you real quick.
That's the one, right?
And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. It don't say all things work together, that all things are good, and it's going to be good if you love God. That's where a lot of people interpret that. They think it means that if I'm a Christian, that everything's going to be good. No, it don't mean that. It means that everything that happens to you, if you are a Christian, everything that happens to you is for good. It's for your good or it's for somebody else's good, but it's always God's good, and it is good. So, basically, here's the deal with Joseph. You see, God puts us where he needs us when he needs us to be there. Now, Joseph hit rock bottom a few different times. I mean, literally hits the lowest lows you can imagine before finally, in his case, getting to be in one of the highest highs that a person can be. I mean, he's literally basically the ruler of Egypt. I mean, that you don't get any higher. But now I will say this: do you think he would have rather just not ever been sold as a slave in the first place? Yeah, I think he would have rather stayed. I believe that Joseph would have gladly been at home with his dad and not had to went through all of that stuff, even though he ended up getting to be the ruler of Egypt. I think that if he had a choice, but that's where we talked about that. It's for God's good. Because Joseph had to go through all of that to get to the place where he would be the ruler of Egypt. And why was he the ruler of Egypt? What good did that do? That's not the good. That's not what it was. It wasn't about Joseph at all. As your mama said, it wasn't about Joseph. What was it about? What if I told you it's about each and every one of us? How do you connect that? How do you connect us to that life of Joseph? Anybody? Without Joseph having been there to been able to keep the seed of Abraham alive, because the famine that hit all over, and Joseph's family had to come to Egypt in order to be able to survive. Had that not happened, that seed of Abraham would not have kept on. What was the result of the seed of Abraham? What was the promise fulfilled? Jesus. So we wouldn't have never got to Jesus. So we wouldn't have never got to here. Joseph had to go through all of that in order for us to be where we are today. If you are at rock bottom right now, if for whatever reason you find yourself at rock bottom, let God lead the way, because it may be that it is the only place that leads to you finding your purpose in this life and what it is that you're supposed to be doing in this life. It may be that that's why you go through those trials and those tribulations. Now, does everybody get to be a Joseph and end up with a lot of riches and things like that? Does it work that way? If you think it does, let me remind you of the Apostle Paul. Read about him and see how rich and famous and all, or rich and glorified life he lived. But you know what? He was the one that wrote Romans 8:28. And he wrote it after having been shipwrecked, and having been beaten, and having been in prison, and all of those things, he still wrote that. As long as they forget, Paul did. Paul wrote it. He was Saul before he was Paul. All right. Trivia point for you, but we're not keeping up with this point tonight. Good job. Oh, all right. Hey, extra credit. What's the significance between the names Saul and Paul?
One of them means like evil, another means good. All
Saul's dad.
Saul
is
means,
past.
Saul means important, big, influential. Paul means small and insignificant. And that's
Yeah,
what
I
he,
knew it.
Wait, say it again, which one's small and insignificant?
Paul is. The name Saul signified importance and, you know, somebody really important to me. Huh? Oh, I'm trying to give y'all a pep. That's that. But the point is this: is not everybody gets to be a Joseph. And I'll say that don't just mean that you end up the ruler. Not everybody gets to hit those super lows in life, and not everybody gets to hit those super highs in life. Some of us live in that rut area, and that's a dangerous place because we get sedentary into it. We just kind of go along with the flow. But remember, whatever happens to you, wherever you find yourself, know that if you're a Christian, if you're a gift of God, that it does work for good. And it may not be ours. We may not see that good. You know, Paul didn't necessarily see the good in his life, but the good was that he was able to basically give us most of the New Testament of this Bible. So, we may not see it here, but we'll see it there. You get to be greater than the second in command of Egypt one day. Just may not be here. All right. Any questions, comments, blah blah blahs, anything? Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
Do you know Irish?
Do I know what?
Do you know Irish?
Do I know Irish?
Do you know what she wishes?
Oh, I was like, yeah, I know Irish. Oh, sure.
She said Irish.
What do you wish?
And
I wish that too. That's a very good wish.
Do you know what I wish or do you know Irish?
Yeah, I know Irish. Hold on, I'm talking to you.
Irish.
Yeah. Denise has got
Your
a,
Irish accent? Her British accent?
That's just supposed to be a.
Mom,
Dad said to do it.
he's the preacher, you're gonna listen to the preacher. Mom, do the
yeah,
British
well,
accent.
hang on. Hold on a minute, wait. Hold on, no. I hope, Josh, are you still recording?
Yeah.
Josh is still recording. When the preacher says it, you gotta do it.
You when you're preaching at home, you're not preaching. You gotta do your British accent.
All right. Here we go. That squirrel doesn't run through the room again. Okay, all right, let's get our prayer request going here. Anybody? Anybody? Yes, ma'am. Granny, that's right.
And Louis.
Yep. And remember Lewis and Janet. How's Janet doing? I know she's been pretty sick. So.
She's better.
I'm glad to hear that. That's good. All right. Yeah, and Mama had the surgery. She was well enough to answer the phone and not let Eddie answer it when Josh called her right before church a while ago. And I guess she's already bossing him around. She's doing better. So y'all remember, because I'm sure it was another block where he's all got a long chain. Yes, ma'am? Absolutely. Yes, sir, Mr. Cease.
My family.
I like it. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, sir.
They must be Christians and
Got anybody in particular in the persecuted Christians? Oh, yes. We don't got Caleb here.
The persecuted, Jerry.
Yeah, your brother beat you.
I don't think he only said, I shot him.
He said, that you know, if you wasn't in that side conversation, you would have heard the first part. Yes, Tom. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
my friendship ends. Mom has to go to the doctor. Yes. My friends, mom has to go to the doctor.
Anybody else? Have you heard anything new?
I think they were coming home today.
Yesterday.
Michael Hightower,
Yeah.
apparently he had had a hip surgery a while back and it didn't heal something, become infected. He's been in the hospital for a long time. This morning, they got the news that they took the hip out and they're sending him home without it.
They did jokes about that, didn't they?
And he's got to be bedridden for 3 months.
And they got to get all the infection out. before they can do that.
I had no idea.
They just,
I
they
thought
hit
that
joint.
They've been through all of this stuff.
Yeah, I'll do somebody do that.
He's got a real
I
time.
thought it was like a rib cage, like, I would have it, just with me,
So I'm sure that means also he's out of work.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, you can't do nothing. Hip joint, I mean.
It's been like a year.
It's just been going on for a while, like,
So I'm sure that.
they just need a lot of prayer. She asked for a lot. And remember, Nana Papa Jack, Sunday.
Oh,
Wait, what?
See, you just have to figure it out.
Good thing I just came over. Wait.
wait a minute. Oh, it's time for the new tag. Yeah. All right, anybody else?
Remember, the Davis family in the Puniac, but she's Mindy was a teacher at, I think it was the Puniac anyways. She had COVID in July or August, anyway, she's been in the hospital ever since.
Who was that?
Her name's Mindy Davis. They had twins that are very new. But she never recovered,
Right.
she never got to come home after.
Oh, my goodness. I can't remember that family, for sure. All right, anybody else? Okay. Y'all remember Wilton Carroll? All right, got anybody else? I like to see the foot differently. All right, is that all we got for tonight? All right, well, let me see, Jacob Bechtel, any of y'all that was not here Sunday, we got an update on him. That's the young man from, Freeport High School that, was battling cancer and, you know, we gave him the money to try to help him out a little bit and that kind of stuff. But he's in, you know, they had to go to Gainesville. He has completed his treatments, but he has to live there in Gainesville. And I think they said he's going to have to stay till about mid-April, in April. But right now, he's completed treatment. He's lost like 30 pounds, but everything is going well. They said things are looking really good for him. So if y'all would remember to keep praying for Jacob Bechtel. And I'll give reports as I can and let y'all know how things are going. And we might even look to see if there's a way that we might assist with him if it's a good need. But it's, they don't, but I've got somebody that works down there that does. That,
Did you lose that shot?
oh, Ashaku, that is through an organization called Voices of Heart.
And they don't tell us about
And we don't really get to hear about Ashaku much. So, now, all right, oh, and Brennan, I guess, is tested positive. for this, so.
Tony and Carol, I guess they were leaving.
Yep.
When, John?
Today.
They leave today to head
So,
back.
yeah.
Remember Tony, Carol, and Hannah. As I understand it, she was very close to her dad, so we remember her. All right, have we got anybody else? Anybody? Nope, is that it? Who's gonna pray for us tonight? Si? Right on. Go ahead. Thank you for volunteer, brother. Y'all bow your heads, so I'm gonna lead some prayer.
Heavenly Father, we just come today, we thank you for blessing us together. God,
All right, y'all. Thank you for coming. See you next time.
Okay.